intense turns deadly as its devastating winds and flooding move inland from the Carolina coast.
The worst may be yet to come as record levels are approaching. You've got upwards of 18 people that have died. You've got 15,000 people in shelters.
As the storm moves west, so do the floodwaters, so do the rescuers, including the military, who are lending a hand.
It's just because I might lose my house, so that's my big thing.
The Kansas deputy shot and killed in the line of duty. Robert Coonsey was gunned down while checking on a suspicious person. Coonsey, a 12-year veteran of the force, leaves behind a wife and a daughter. Well, the White House, meantime, is standing by Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh. The Democrats are seizing the moment, demanding a delay.
A California college professor is accusing the White House Supreme Court nominee of sexual misconduct.
A handful of NFL players protesting the national anthem yet again.
Why do we have to mix football? You know, the season just started with so much, this patriotic.
Live from New York City, it is Monday, September the 17th. Come on in, folks. You're watching the #1 cable morning news show on planet Earth. Good to have you.
Happy Monday morning. Hope you and your family are doing well.
Does it bother you at all that Hootie and the Blowfish never officially broke up?
No.
It doesn't?
Well, okay, they're still friends, but they don't tour. Darius Rucker's on his own now doing country music.
But he
So
never had closure. They never had closure. Like, no more Hootie and the Blowfish.
This way they can get back together for a reunion tour. You watch. That's coming.
Does this bother you? Write us and let us know. Brian wants to know. This
Just
keeps
curious.
him up at night.
All right. Anyway, thank you very much for joining us on this Monday. And it's a very busy Monday. We start with the Fox News alert. A Kansas deputy shot and killed in the line of duty. His name, Robert Coonsey, gunned down while checking on a suspicious character driving around in a truck near Wichita, Kansas.
The word is a fight starting when Coonsey took the suspect's gun. Shots ring out. The struggle happens, killing both the deputy and the suspect. Coonsey, a 12-year veteran of the force, leaves behind a wife and a daughter.
He was only 41 years old, and get this, he's one of 36 officers killed in the line of duty so far this year. That number already surpassing last year's total of 35 officers killed.
And apparently there is dash cam video from his cruiser in Sedgwick County, which is Wichita, Kansas. They have, according to a news report I read this morning, they've been unable to download it so far. And at the time of the shooting, he was wearing a ballistic vest, but the bullet went in above the vest.
And he called for help.
Yeah.
So he was able to call for help, but he wasn't.
They found him lying on his side. They found the suspect lying on his face, and there was a .40 caliber weapon on the ground next to them. We also have some other news to tell you about. Let's go down to the Carolinas, where that storm has never been more dangerous. Officials warning of what lies ahead as hundreds of people remain trapped in their homes in the wake of Hurricane Florence.
The slow-moving storm killing at least 17 people.
Griff Jenkins is live in Jacksonville, North Carolina, with more on the threat of rising water. And Griff, I've heard that people down there are worried because there's a possibility you could wind up with close to another foot of rain.
That's exactly right, guys. Florence is not done. It's not just the deaths. If you look at 15,000 people in shelters, more than 1,000 rescues already over the last 4 days, even 500 folks here in just Jacksonville area in shelters alone. The Coast Guard, the National Guard working around the clock because the big problem is with this rain, Steve, with all this water, the river banks are bursting. You've got the New River behind me flooding this street. We're about a block off of it. It's really, really bad. The Cape Fear running all the way to Fayetteville and Lumberton, threatening the inlands. And that's why Governor Roy Cooper said we're far from over. Tomorrow may be worse than today. Listen.
This storm has never been more dangerous than it is right now for areas from Fayetteville and Lumberton across the Sandhills and southern Piedmont to our mountains.
Now, the water, as you see behind me in Jacksonville, makes mobility impossible for recovery crews to come in as they continue to do rescues like they did all day yesterday. Norm Bryson is the Onslow County Director of Emergency Services. Here's what he had to say.
So far, what we're dealing with is probably the most catastrophic disaster that this county has seen in the last 50 or 60 years since Hurricane Hazel came in 1954.
And you look at the personal stories. We talked to Captain Bob Beck, the owner for 22 years of the Marina Cafe, a landmark here in Jacksonville. His restaurant under a couple of feet of water, his dock under 10 to 15 feet of water. But he says he's going to try and pull through this tough time. Listen.
We've got a lot of loyal customers, and they are ready. They're ready to help and come back. And it's going to take a few months, but we'll get open, and we're going to make it. We're going to make it great again.
And so we'll continue to move inland a little bit as this threat continues to rise, guys. It's far from over. Florence ain't done.
Indeed, it is not. All right, Griff, thank you very much. A little broadband problem there at the conclusion. Listen, if you're traveling down I-95 and you're going from the north to the south or the south to the north, just be forewarned that there are portions of 95 closed near Lumberton and near Falcon and Dunn, not far from Fort Bragg, which is, of course, the largest U.S. Military installation in the United States of America.
Well, it's hot, it's dark, businesses are closed, people can't get the necessities that they need, and the roads are impassable.
Well,
sad for those folks.
And that is huge news, and we'll be tracking it throughout the show, obviously, as we had all weekend. Meanwhile, stunning news in the quest for the confirmation of Brett Kavanaugh as the next Supreme Court Justice, and that is we now have a name of the accuser that claims that she was assaulted by Brett Kavanaugh when they were in high school. Her name is Christine Blasey Ford. She is a Palo Alto, she's a professor in Palo Alto, and she went into great detail in a letter that was published in the Washington Post yesterday afternoon, for truly putting this vote in doubt.
And here's the headline from the Washington Post yesterday afternoon. California professor, writer of confidential Brett Kavanaugh letter, speaks out about her allegation of sexual assault. She apparently contacted, this woman, Christine Blasey Ford, contacted the Washington Post back in July when Kavanaugh was first named. Being on the short list, it looked like he was going to replace Kennedy. Then she also contacted the Democrat congresswoman from her district, Anna Eshoo, who sent a letter to Dianne Feinstein. They knew about it since July, and one of the things I saw said that Feinstein sat on the letter. I think this is the Washington Post article. Feinstein sat on the letter citing a request for privacy for the woman. She wanted people to know that there was this allegation, but she did not want her name attached to it.
That's right. Well, Feinstein never asked her about it in the hearings, and Kavanaugh is categorically and unequivocally denying the allegation. She wrote in the letter that a friend was with Kavanaugh when this happened more than 30 years ago, that they were stumbling drunk, and that Kavanaugh pinned her on the bed and tried to attack her and take her clothes off. Well, the friend, his name is Mark Judge. He's a classmate from Georgetown Prep School. They went to high school together. And the friend, Mr. Judge, says that is absolutely nuts. He never saw Brett Kavanaugh act that way, that he was a brilliant student. He loves sports and not into anything crazy or illegal. And then 65 women have come forward. They wrote a letter. Chuck Grassley published this letter, and he said 65 women knew Brett Kavanaugh in high school, and they said, quote, through the more than 35 years we've known him, Brett has stood out for his friendship, character, and integrity.
So they were going to have a couple of votes. First, they were going to break the filibuster, means you got to have a simple majority. Then they were going to have a committee vote, and then it was going to go to the general Senate population, and they were supposed to, with Collins and Murkowski on board, were supposed to get the majority, and he was supposed to sit on the bench. Now you have some Republicans coming out, like Senator, you can guess it, Jeff Flake, saying, I need to hear from her first. Lindsey Graham says, fine, that's a good idea. Let's hear from her, but let's do this quickly. Let's get this, let's find out what the truth is, but let's still have the vote, and let's keep it everything on schedule.
So it sounds like Chuck Grassley is trying to arrange for some sort of a call with this particular Ms. Ford. Chuck Schumer has said we got to put off the vote. Keep in mind, folks, the vote is supposed to happen still on schedule for Thursday. But Chuck Schumer says this. He says to railroad a vote now would be an insult to the women of America and the integrity of the Supreme Court as well. And then you've got Lindsey Graham, who said this. If Ms. Ford wishes to provide information to the committee, I would gladly listen to what she has to say and compare that against all other information we have received about Judge Kavanaugh. So the big question is, what happens now? Will there be a vote on Thursday? Will she wind up coming and speaking before the committee? We don't know yet.
Timing's fascinating. I mean, out of everything that came out, you had all these hearings. We were covering it live. Every network was covering it live, nonstop, 6 FBI investigations. And then the letter comes forward, and then the name comes out all in one day.
Yeah, this woman, she's a Democrat. She's a professor in California, and she didn't want her name out there. And her attorney was saying, you know, it's not going to change the vote. I don't know if you want all of the scrutiny. And she decided she didn't. But then it was leaked out, and now she's trying to defend herself. And that's why it's now public, her name at least.
That's right. We're going to talk to Kellyanne Conway about this when she joins us from the White House a little later on. But right now at 6:10 in the morning, we got some news.
All right, here's some headlines for you. Some more headlines, I should say. Too much pressure in gas pipes now, blamed for several deadly explosions outside of Boston. More than 60 homes in 3 towns catching fire, killing 1 person and injuring 25 others. Thousands of people returning to their damaged houses over the weekend after mandatory evacuations. Authorities believe the Columbia Gas Company is linked to 5 major blasts in Massachusetts, West Virginia, and Ohio since 2007. Another woman linked to the anti-Trump dossier is going before Congress. Nellie Orr, she's the wife of DOJ official Bruce Orr. She's going to be testifying this week. She worked for Fusion GPS, the firm that's behind the dossier. The closed-door session will focus on Nellie's role with the firm and Bruce Orr's ties to the dossier and to the dossier's author, Christopher Steele. Her testimony comes after Bruce Orr testified last month. Arizona Senate candidates in the thick of the immigration crisis take on border security. Republican Martha McSally and Democrat Kyrsten Sinema debating at a Fox News town hall. Listen.
This is extremely frustrating that the Democrats have been obstructing border security. This should be a unifying issue. I have been leading in the House to make sure that we fight for the resources and the policies to secure our border.
We should have money for drones, night vision cameras. My concern about just funding a border wall is it's an 18th century solution to a 21st century problem.
The two are facing off for retiring Senator Jeff Flake's seat. And plenty of excitement.
He goes, I'm done?
Done.
Great.
Steve, do you think that that's going to happen to us at one point in the middle of the show? We're going to be like, you know what? I lost my fastball. I got to run. You know what? Check, please. Is that we're going to do it? I know Chris Chulo. Chris, if you ever feel like it's over, don't wait till the end of the show. You just go. Get out.
No, you're
go
not
ahead,
allowed.
Chris. Go
you're
ahead.
not allowed. He just had an epiphany. Maybe it's just like praying about it. God, let me know when I'm done. I need to hear from you. And in the middle of the show, that's when he knew.
It's the Bills. He probably says, God, we stink. Can I leave?
Well, that's one way to do it. Just saying. All right.
Good for him.
6:13 now.
Good for him.
Yeah. Now he's sleeping in.
Now he has no paycheck.
No 2 days.
Okay. Meanwhile, Democrats attack everything about President Trump. Now they attack his slogan.
This sort of thinking, this make America great mindset, is not only flawed, it's rooted in fear.
Dan Bongino has plenty to say about that. He's coming up shortly.
I bet he does. And a circus turns into chaos the moments that kids are tossed right off a camel's back as spectators are watching. We're going to tell you what happened.
Not seen yet.
The White House standing behind Supreme Court nominee Judge Brett Kavanaugh as the woman accusing him of assaulting her back in the 80s is coming forward to the Washington Post. So what impact will this have on Thursday's vote? Let's bring in Fox News contributor Tammy Bruce, president of the Independent Women's Voice. Thank you for being with us, Tammy.
Good morning.
This is a tough one. You have one woman saying something that happened 30 years ago.
Sure.
He is vehemently denying it. What are your thoughts about this?
Look, this is the problem, and we can't really address her allegations in a way because we don't know what happened. We don't have the benefit of a real justice system framework, of an accuser making the accusation and the accused being able to defend himself or herself. We don't have that. What we do know, though, is this. From the start here, Dianne Feinstein had an allegation that she says is credible, yet said and did nothing about it.
We never heard about it in the hearings.
We
didn't. Knew about it then.
She had interviews with Judge Kavanaugh. She didn't tell the committee. She didn't tell the FBI. She waited until effectively everything else they had done did not work. And so it was like a Hail Mary pass, confirming, and this is my main point, confirming that this was exclusively a political act. It was effectively an attempt at a political assassination of a character, an attempt to use an experience like this as a cudgel. And this is my concern, is that as Americans see and deal with one of the most important issues facing women, and regardless, again, of what we can address about what she's accusing, they want this to be now a trial in public by allegation and gossip. And it really denigrates what we've tried to do for generations, which is to be taken taken seriously. And now we see it just as another tool in a tool chest. And for those of us who are survivors of sexual assault, of domestic violence, of violence in general, it really moves us into another arena of being just used, and the experience is being used. And that's what, of course, breaks my heart. It's a dynamic that no one's discussing, and it clearly has just been used now as a political hatchet to affect someone. And I think that for all of us, it's heartbreaking.
We don't exactly know what happened. We're not negating the allegations here. It's just the timing of it that a lot of Republicans are questioning now. And it's a topic of conversation at the dinner table last night with all my friends. We were talking about this. Do you hold someone accountable for something that happened so long ago? She can't really remember all the details, but she's now coming forward. And the timing of this, what are your thoughts about the timing of it? Because we're just a few days away from the confirmation.
Well, that's the one thing we know. That's the facts that we actually do have. Are the choices being made? Look, I worked on the Feinstein campaign in '92, and shame on her for doing this, for having us have this conversation, for that woman now being in this position. But then for the work we've done as women and as feminists and as activists for 50 years, trying to get women to be taken seriously, to be able to use the system for protection, for us to be able to come forward, and at the same time to have the accused be able to respond properly. Now it's just in this political sea, and I don't think it helps any of us in this process.
Tammy, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
We have more Fox and Friends coming up.
All right, quick headlines right now. We start with some extreme weather. Tropical storm Mangkhut killing at least 2 people as it blasts through China. Rain and strong winds expected through tomorrow. The storm responsible for killing 65 people in the Philippines, dozens missing, but it's feared none of them will be found alive. And a shark is spotted miles from the scene of a deadly attack, the Cape Cod beach where Arthur Medici was killed on Saturday. It is now closed. The 26-year-old engineering student viciously attacked while boogie boarding with a friend. Medici's death marks the first deadly shark attack in Massachusetts in more than 80 years. He was engaged to be married. Steve.
Thanks, Brian. Tragedy striking not once but twice for a family on Long Island, New York. A mother, Evelyn Rodriguez, whose daughter was brutally murdered by MS-13 2 years ago, killed Friday night after being struck by an SUV while preparing for a candlelight vigil at her daughter's memorial. Evelyn died 2 years ago to the day that her daughter's body was found. Evelyn being remembered as a fierce champion for her daughter, advocating tirelessly in the fight against gang violence, including with President Trump. She also highlighted her fight on this program.
He's a kids kidding, kids. That shouldn't be tolerated at all. These individuals are ruthless. I just hope and pray one day that this stops. How many more kids need to die in order to make a change?
Here with reaction, the man you just saw right there in the image with her, Suffolk County District Attorney and former Police Commissioner Timothy Sina. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Shocking.
This is tragic. In Suffolk County, we are heartbroken. Evelyn was a true partner to law enforcement. Right. She was a fierce advocate for her community in Brentwood and became a national figure. She was able to talk about these issues, obviously, firsthand, and was very effective.
Absolutely. And the president told her story many, many times. You were really familiar with it. When people saw that, they thought, we wonder if this is MS-13 related, the same group that killed her daughter.
Right. So the investigation is ongoing, but what we can say at this point is that this has nothing to do with MS-13. So the investigation will be completed. It will be a thorough and complete investigation. But we have told the public and will continue to reiterate that this has nothing to do with MS-13.
Right. There's a story in the New York Post that says that Evelyn had apparently an argument with a woman who unhappy with the fact that she was trying to unload some property nearby, couldn't sell it, and felt like the memorial that she had set up to her daughter could be one of the reasons nobody was buying the property. I know you're not going to get into that right now because you said the investigation is ongoing. But the larger picture about what she was advocating was the end of MS-13 violence in your area. Since she came to the forefront and started talking to the president and America, how's that turned out?
So just to give you a couple proof points of her effectiveness, the president, after the president coming to Central Islip, Suffolk County was awarded a $500,000 grant to combat MS-13. The governor of our state, Andrew Cuomo, awarded several millions of dollars to Long Island, including Suffolk County, to invest in gang prevention and intervention programs. She was a fierce advocate. She was incredibly effective, and she was above the fray. She could speak about this from firsthand experience. She had that credibility, and she was incredibly bright. She took that tragedy of the murder of her daughter and turned it into a positive motivation to affect positive change.
Well, that is her legacy. And of course, now you're trying to figure out what happened. From what I understand, there is evidence of what happened. There was a local news crew there on the location.
That's right. This is an investigation that will hopefully conclude in a short period of time. We will get all the facts and we'll make the right decisions.
All right. Well, she was a friend of this program, and she was on a number of times, and it's just shocking. Tim, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
All right. 6:28 here in New York City now. A circus turns into chaos the moment kids are tossed right off a camel's back as spectators watch in horror. Went terribly wrong. We're going to tell you what happened next. You're not going to believe it. Plus, Eric Holder now slamming President Trump's signature slogan.
This sort of thinking, this make America great mindset, is not only flawed, it's rooted in fear.
I don't think he likes it. Dan Bongino is fired up about that, and he's going to react with us next. But first, happy birthday to our own Jillian Milley. She's having a big birthday celebration today. Happy birthday, Jillian. You're back with a Fox News alert. That man, a Kansas deputy, shot and killed in the line of duty. Robert Coonsey gunned down while checking on a suspicious character who was reported driving around an area in Sedgwick County, Kansas in an SUV.
All right, police say gunfire erupted during a fight between Coonsey and the suspect. Both of them died during the struggle.
Coonsey is a 12-year veteran of the Sedgwick County Sheriff's Office, and he leaves behind a wife and a daughter, and he was only 41 years old. Let's bring in Dan Bongino, the former NYPD officer, former Secret Service agent, and host of the Dan Bongino Show. Thanks for being with us, Dan. You know, this is just, I feel like every week we're reporting another death of a police officer. So far this year, 36 officers have been killed in the line of duty. Last year, 35. So we've already surpassed last year's number, and we're only in September. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, Ainsley, you know, whenever you hear these stories about these young police officers with these children, you know, I always have this image in my head of these empty kitchen tables. I mean, we have to keep in mind that these are obviously, these are soccer coaches, these are dads, these are moms, police officers, their job. Now, it's a higher calling. I think most of us would agree, given the danger of the job, the public service component to it, but it's a job for them. They go to work, they do their jobs every day, and I remember sitting at roll calls in the 7-5 precinct in East New York, Brooklyn, and you'd be shocked at the bravery of these people. And the bravery is an everyday bravery. Yeah. They go to work knowing every day it could be their last time. They know that, but they don't think about that. They just do it. And that the fact that this young man, 41, I mean, gosh, I'm young. I don't feel that young, but I'm 43. This young man's 2 years younger than me. His kids will never, ever see him again. And, you know, that's why when I see a cop, I always just say, you know, hey, thanks. It's the right thing to do.
Hey, Dan, does it matter if you just say, if you kill an officer, death penalty? In this case, he died. But could that be a repellent for this type of cavalier killing of cops that people are getting used to?
You know, Brian, I'm not sure, and I wish there were an easier answer to that. And really, nothing bothers me more than coming on the air and not having some kind of a well-rehearsed answer. But with a situation like this, I'm genuinely not sure. And the reason is this. When you get in these situations like that, and these guys, these criminals, are so depraved and so desperate, I'm not sure they're thinking about anything. I don't think there's a penalty severe enough that would stop some of these savages from doing what they do. I really don't.
So there's no war on cops there per se. It's just there are some really bad people out there.
Yeah, I mean, I remember being a police officer and rolling in those streets, and you'd see people who all they had to do was follow one simple command, yet they were so desperate to get out of what they were doing that, you know, would resort to violence often, sadly. I wish that weren't the case, but it is.
Is it usually because they have a record, they have a, you know, a long rap sheet and they don't get caught?
Yeah, now we didn't have 3 strikes in New York, but sometimes you have 3 strikes rules. Yeah, there's a warrant. There's a warrant for an even more serious crime. And what's bizarre is they really think they're going to get away. Right. And Ainsley, I'm telling you, in my experience, the chances of you getting away are pretty much slim to none.
All right, so let's talk politics for a second on a lesser note. I am stunned at the level of angst and anger directed at the President of the United States sitting in office, not only from the former president, but from the people that used to work with him. Case in point, Eric Holder. Listen.
This sort of thinking, this make America great mindset, is not only flawed, it's rooted in fear. And it favors an imagined past over a realistic future.
What does that mean?
You know, you're right. This is unprecedented, this body of former officials so early in a presidency trying to take down a sitting administration. And Eric Holder, Brian, I mean, the nerve on this guy. We're talking about an attorney general who sat in office during the AP phone records scandal, the Fast and Furious debacle, a guy who sat in front of Congress. He was charged with the IRS, the weaponization of the IRS to target political enemies. The nerve on this guy to talk about fear. The Obama administration, when he was the Department of Justice head, weaponized fear to go after their political enemies. But to have them all out there at the same time with this seemingly coordinated message going after this president, again, their First Amendment, God bless you. Speak out if you wish. But this is really unprecedented. Yeah. I don't think we've seen anything like this.
Don't forget John Kerry, too. I mean, with his ridiculous international record out there trying to scurry the president's international agenda when it comes to the world's #1 evil power, and that's Iran.
Brian, the John Kerry thing, I can't get over because they used the Logan Act, negotiating with foreign officials, as a predicate to take down Trump's national security advisor. And then John Kerry goes and advertises that he's doing it on television. He's like, yeah, I was out with the Iranians having coffee, talking about how to screw over the United States.
How to wait out
did
Trump.
We miss something?
Yeah, sure. And then, you listen to Bob Woodward. He has revealed with his book, Fear, that he looked for 2 years for collusion between Trump and the Russians, and he could not find it. And Lisa Page said at the time of the Mueller investigation, when he was appointed, they didn't have anything.
Steve, in Woodward's book, he talks about Manafort shocking the president by not telling him ahead of time his relations with the Ukraine. And Bannon coming in there and saying, you better get ahead of this New York Times story. When the president sees about your ties to the Ukraine, he's going to hit the roof. You can't say the Woodward book is right and still say there's collusion.
I don't mean to, but there are so many suckers out there who still buy this. You have the Watergate reporter, Bob Woodward, the left loves, coming out in his book saying, hey, guys, I investigated this thing. I don't see that. You have Lisa Page come out this weekend with this new report in The Hill. She says, hey, this could have been literally nothing. Hey, you think this could have been literally nothing? You think America might want to know that after 2 years of having the country nearly shut down about the Russian invasion? You think we might want to know? I mean, I can't believe how many people got suckered by this
That's
thing.
right. And it does sound as if the president could be really close to declassifying some of that stuff. So we know more. Stay tuned for that. Dan, thank you very much for joining us today from Palm City down in Florida.
Thank you, Dan.
Got it, guys. Have a great week.
You're welcome. You too. Here are some more headlines for you. Important Russia probe documents will soon be in the hands of the American people. House Intelligence Committee Chairman Devin Nunes says he's releasing interview transcripts related to the investigation.
We believe that the depositions that we took, I think were nearly about 70 people, those need to be published. And they need to be published, I think, before the election.
73 witnesses have been interviewed in the investigation, and Nunes aims to make most of those transcripts available within the next few weeks. If an active shooter steps into an Illinois school, they want to be ready. More than 20 campuses installing these emergency devices. That's what they look like right there. They're blue fire alarms, and all users have to do is push down the lever to alert police that there's an emergency. According to the Chicago Tribune, several Blue Point systems have been installed in Chicago area schools. 2,113 people have been shot in Chicago this year. A chaotic scene at the circus when a camel goes wild, the animal getting spooked and throwing kids off of its back. 6 children and 1 adult taken to the hospital after the mishap in Pittsburgh. It happened during a mid-show event where kids are invited to see the arena to see animals up close and to take a ride. 1 child suffered a broken arm. And those are your headlines.
That's not supposed to happen.
No, a lot
Right.
of them went to the hospital.
Exactly. 20 minutes now before the top of the hour. Let's turn to extreme weather and the threat of flooding in the wake of Florence. This drone video showing roads and neighborhoods underwater in North Carolina.
Janice Dean joins us right now with the forecast. And Janice, it's still raining.
The aerial footage that we are getting in from parts of North Carolina is breathtaking. We are dealing with historic flooding now, and some of those rivers have not crested yet, and they will crest at historic levels. So the flooding is not over yet, even though the rain is moving northward. Let's take a look at the total. So this is North Carolina. By the way, North Carolina and South Carolina breaking records, state records, for the most water ever received from a tropical system from Florence. So this is incredible. Both North Carolina and South Carolina have broken records in terms of tropical systems and how wet this was. So close to 34 inches for parts of North Carolina, and Wilmington shattering their record of over 85 inches of rainfall in a calendar year. So it's just incredible the amount of water. Again, it was because this system was so slow moving, very much like Harvey did to southeast Texas. So there it is right now. It is a tropical depression. It is weakening, but we're still seeing more rainfall in the forecast. Flash flood warning still in effect for parts of South Carolina, North Carolina, now up to Virginia. The storm will pull northward up towards the northeast, but we are not done by any scope. The damage reports continue to come in. We won't know the real epic legacy of the storm until perhaps weeks in. Back to you.
But it is one for the record books. All right. JD, thank you.
And now there's all this looting that they're worried about, too. Family Dollar stores, Dollar General has had looting.
They should know there's video everywhere.
Yep.
Meanwhile, 18 minutes before the top of the hour, as Janice just showed us, Florence is not done wreaking havoc. We're going to ask Kellyanne Conway about the government's response. That's happening next hour.
And 17 years ago today, the stock market reopened for the first time after the September the 11th attacks in 2001. The former economic advisor under President Obama joins us to reflect on that day and today's economy. Coming up next.
In the days after 9/11, the country came together, uniting in the face of evil, showing terrorists they would not win.
Ladies and gentlemen, our heroes will now open the marketplace. The green button.
The New York Stock Exchange reopening just 1 week after the deadly attacks on this day 17 years ago. Here to speak about the emotional reopening and the state of the economy today is the former chairman of the UBS, Robert Wolf. Robert, what are your thoughts looking at that video?
Well, that was surreal because it was the first time since 1933 that the market was ever closed, and that was for 2 days. This was for 4 days. And I don't know if you recall, when it opened, it had the largest one-day drop, 7%, 600 points. So, and for the most part, that prolonged the recession. And it was just, I think, the most surreal time and obviously the most devastating time in my lifetime.
Because not only was America hit, it was hit right in the financial center.
Yep.
So it's not saying, well, out of respect for where the country's going through. No, that was the area that was hit.
Yeah, I think that they did the right thing closing the market because there would have been a run on the banks. There would have been, there was already panic in the street, panic throughout the country, and I think at the end of the day they made the right decision. And, a month later the market rebounded, but it really prolonged the whole recession. And then it started the war on terror.
Right. And now let's talk about the market and where it is today and where it was. It's up considerably, about 20% since that day.
That day was at 7,000, the Dow, so you're talking, annualized, it's been crazy, but it's up, 3 times, 25,000.
So 25,000. And what does that tell you about our economy?
The economy is very strong, but I think that there are some concerns because we've never been in an environment where rising rate environment, huge debt and deficit, a protectionist kind of rhetoric, and then more importantly, this type of dysfunction in Washington.
People listen on radio.
There are some concerns right now, but the market feels really good.
Why is confidence at such a high?
It's such a high because I think the consumer feels good, the markets feel good, the tax cut obviously was a positive for the consumer, but we should recall in 2000 and 2001, consumer confidence was the highest it's been since this year, and then we had the dot-com bubble. So consumer confidence is a point in time. And things like a rising rate environment, or God forbid there's some sort of war, all of a sudden consumer confidence can wane fairly quickly.
So one thing about the tax cut, it was supposed to bring a lot of foreign money back home because the corporate tax environment was better. We're expecting maybe $5 trillion to come back. So far we only have $141 billion that's come back. Do you believe when you talk to your corporate, the people who make these decisions with these large corporations, are they beginning to understand that this is for real, that these corporate tax cuts from 35 to 21 happened?
I think everyone's concerned about repatriating money because, this tax cut went through. Now there's tax cuts of possibility of 2.0. But when you have a fiscal deficit that's crept up the way it has to possibly $1 trillion by year end, you could see unwinding of various parts of the tax code. You could equally see, tax code 2.0 to kind of, make some of the changes that are needed. So the unfortunate thing for corporate America is there's such dysfunction in Washington that it's hard to make real decisions about the future.
Right. So with the $22 trillion debt overall, $1 trillion annually, that's a bad combination.
It's a really bad combination because I think right now fiscal responsibility is being ignored. And, this has nothing to do with a Democrat or Republican. Someone's going to have to pay those bills.
Yep. Simpson Bowles had us on track. We didn't even entertain it or vote on it.
Totally ignored it.
Yeah. Thanks, Mr. Wolf. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on.
All right. 10 minutes before the top of the hour. Judge Andrew Napolitano is coming your way. He's going to be talking about Mr. Kavanaugh, Kellyanne Conway on what the White House goes from here, and Katie Pavlich, all here live. Plus, it's Constitution Day. College students are getting a much-needed education. A professor behind that effort is next, 231 years old.
Welcome back, everyone. Will the wall ever get built? According to new reporting tonight from Jonathan Swan of Axios, the president has accepted and told Republican leaders he's not going to get the votes to pay for it before the midterm elections. Of course, that hasn't stopped the president tweeting, including the famous words, "Finish the wall." Tommy, how about start the wall?
Well, the wall is being started, but we need far more work on it. As you know, I spent some time at the border, specifically in Tucson, Nogales area. We need a wall. What we have now is not cutting it. But I think to accept defeat on this is a mistake. I think that you should put it up and you should see which Republicans really believe in fixing our immigration system, really believe in border enforcement, and which ones do not. Because for too long, we've had too many Republicans who campaign on border security, but then when it comes right down to it, where do they go?
That's exactly right. Why won't they have this? I just don't understand what's holding that back.
Because they're vulnerable. They don't want to do it before the midterms because that makes some of these candidates vulnerable. I say make them vulnerable. Let's see where they stand on this issue. That's what the American people voted for in 2016. That's what we're going to vote again on in the midterms, and we should see which ones are truly about border enforcement.
I so agree with you, and this is exactly the kind of thing that drives people crazy, is like incredibly simple, clear promises. They're not delivered.
Well, as a country, we spend over $120 billion every year, so we can build a lot of walls if we use that money wisely, and that's why we need to vote for people like myself who are actually going to vote and fight for the president and the administration and the country, because at the end of the day, we got to fight for the American people. The American people voted for this guy to get elected. We want a wall. We want to protect the American people, and we don't want this open border any longer.
So you're both agreeing that actually that some work has begun. The president mentioned
the wall is being built right now.
Okay,
we don't
tell
have
us about that. What exactly is happening?
Well, we started the wall already with the money that the president was able to get, but the Congress...
Where? Just describe what I mean...
Well, the president already talked about it. We've been there. We've been to the wall. The wall is being built right now, but we don't have a long wall that's protecting the American country, so we need to work from this point on. It won't happen before November. It's not going to happen, but maybe next year, as soon as possible, we need this wall.
Well, that's why you've got to vote for the right people. That is true, isn't it?
Of course, and we need to hold them to their word, because I see all of these Republican candidates going on all the networks, including ours, and talking about how they believe in border security and border enforcement. Then guess what happens? They get elected and they're safe, then they no longer have to worry about it anymore. I think the American people are fed up with it. Democrats, Republicans, we should all be fed up with it.
I actually genuinely don't understand the mentality of opposing it. I mean, what's going on that they don't...
Well, open borders, more programs for
but
California.
Not for Republicans. I mean, you can't... It's the Republicans.
But they're owned.
They're
owned by private interests, and they're owned by these lobbyists who own them for the rest of their lives. They're not working for the American people. This November, decide who you're going to vote for. Get to know your candidate really well. Go to the office, shake his hand or her hand, and make sure you understand who they are as people.
This actually makes a really important point that actually the president needs this kind of populist movement behind him because he's working with a leftover Republican establishment that doesn't really agree with him.
No, and they're a huge part of the problem because this president keeps his promises, as we've seen, as much as he can, but he can't do it alone. But then we've got him saying, all right, I know I'm not going to get my wall. As Ann Coulter has said many times, we're still waiting for the wall. I think it's a mistake for President Trump not to push for funding for it. We should see in the midterm elections who's really going to turn out for the American people.
Fair enough. All right, coming up, Tommy and I were part of a big announcement this week. More on that after the break. Don't go away. All right, there was a big announcement last week, as I mentioned. It was about Fox Nation, and lots of your favorite Fox News stars and me are going to be involved. Tommy is very much in the lead. Tell us about it.
I can't wait for it. It's going to be a subscription-based streaming service, and that's going to be for the Fox News superfan to go and access all kinds of new content. This isn't just the channel. This is additional things. This is where my first thoughts, my final thoughts are going to be. This is where documentaries, specials are going to be. This is truly going to revolutionize Fox News as we know it. We've been working on it for a while, and we really can't wait to show it to you guys.
So what do people need to do?
You need to go to foxnation.com and sign up for updates. That's how you're going to find out.
Very good. And you'll see me there too. I'll tell you all about that later on. Thank you so much, Antonio, Tommy, and also to Anne. You can learn more about The Next Revolution by following us at NextRevFNC and at Steve Hilton X. Mark Levin is up next. I'm Steve Hilton. See you next Sunday when The Next Revolution will be televised.